They thought the knife would silence you. They believed the betrayal would end you, that the wound would be too deep, the silence too loud, the shame too unbearable. But what they didn't know is that you were never made of glass. You were fire waiting for friction. Every time they turned their back, every time they whispered your name with poison in their mouths, they were chiseling something stronger into your soul. You didn't crumble, you crystallized. The very hands that tried to cut you down ended up forging the steel in your spine. You rose, not because you wanted revenge, but because your fall was never the end. It was the beginning of something holy, something fierce, and now, that crown you wear, it shines because of the blood they tried to spill. Their knife didn't destroy you, it revealed you. The blade was never the enemy. They wanted you to believe it was a punishment, that the betrayal, the abandonment, the sudden shift in their voice and the coldness in their eyes was some kind of deserved fate. But listen closely. What pierced you wasn't meant to end you. It was meant to begin you. The blade they used wasn't the end of your story. It was the chisel that shaped the masterpiece they never saw coming. Their betrayal, sharp and sudden, was never about you being weak. It was about you being chosen. Chosen to be tested, chosen to be transformed. They mistook your silence as defeat, never realizing that silence is where warriors are built, that in the lonely hours where your name was dragged through shadows, something eternal was being carved out of you. You didn't collapse under the weight of their cruelty. You grew stronger legs to carry more than you ever thought possible. They thought the wound would leave you bitter, broken, small. But you didn't just survive, you learned. You learned that loyalty given to the wrong hearts is not a mistake, it's a lesson. You learned that not all who stand beside you are there to build you. Some are there to teach you how to rebuild after they burn it all down. And you rebuilt in silence, in pain, in grace. The very pain they thought would ruin you taught you how to stand alone, how to rise without applause, how to speak to your own soul and say, I am not what they did to me. I am what I do with what they did. You didn't become bitter. You became better, and the most poetic part of it all, the knife they used to cut you is now the symbol of your strength. What they meant for your destruction became the tool of your resurrection. You are walking proof that pain, when embraced with dignity, transforms into power. So no, the blade was never the enemy. The enemy was the illusion that their cruelty could define you. But you broke that illusion. You outgrew it, you rose from it, and now when they see you stronger, calmer, more grounded than ever, they don't understand it. They don't know how the very storm they sent to drown you became the ocean where you learned to breathe. So remember this: what was meant to wound you formed your weapon. What was meant to silence you became your anthem. What was meant to bury you crowned you. You don't wear that pain as a scar. You wear it as gold, as proof, as memory, because the blade never broke you. It awakened you. Pain spoke when peace went silent. Peace is a beautiful illusion, until it blinds you, until it lulls you into forgetting who you are, what you carry, and how far you've drifted from your strength. But pain does not whisper. It doesn't ask for permission. It arrives uninvited, sits at your table, and demands your attention, and as much as you hated its voice, you listened, because peace never asked you the hard questions. It let you settle, it let you shrink, it let you stay loyal to people who secretly celebrated your silence. But pain made you notice. It made you aware of who clapped when you were down and who disappeared when you had nothing to offer. It stripped away the noise, the fake smiles, the shallow comfort. And in that hollow silence you began to hear your soul again, the one you had neglected for too long, the one that still remembered your worth, even when the world forgot. They thought hurting you would finish you, but pain is not your enemy. It's your revealer. It revealed who you became while trying to please those who never deserved your kindness. It revealed the cracks behind the perfect image you were trying so hard to maintain. And in that ache, in that raw, restless ache, you were finally real. No more pretending, no more sugar coating, no more lying to yourself just to keep the peace. because peace that costs your dignity is not peace. It's quiet surrender. You learned that the hard way, but now you know the difference between silence and serenity, between stillness and stagnation, between keeping peace and keeping yourself. Pain became your greatest teacher because it taught you what comfort could never touch. It taught you how to sit with yourself in the dark and still believe in your light. It taught you how to stand without applause, how to rebuild without approval, how to trust yourself after trusting all the wrong people. You didn't want the pain, but you needed it, not to punish you, but to purify you, to strip away everything that was never really yours, to remind you that your spirit is not fragile. It's forged, and what forged it? Disappointment, betrayal, loneliness, silence. You became your strongest when everything around you collapsed, and that strength, that quiet, commanding strength, it wasn't born in comfort. It was born in agony. That's why you walk differently now. That's why you don't flinch at people's opinions anymore. You've already been through the fire. Why would you fear smoke? You learned to thank the pain, not because it was fair, not because it was easy, but because it taught you what peace never could. How to find your voice when the world goes quiet, and how to crown yourself when no one else will. Buried roots break the surface stronger. They thought they buried you quietly, subtly, as if your absence wouldn't echo, as if your silence meant defeat. But what they didn't realize is that you are not a fallen leaf. You are a buried seed, and every attempt to bury you wasn't a burial. It was a planting, a preparation, a process. They covered you with criticism, with abandonment, with whispers you were never meant to hear. But your soul heard them anyway. You felt the soil close in, the pressure mount, the air grow thinner. It was dark. It was cold. You questioned everything, your worth, your path, your strength. But even in that darkness, your roots went deeper. Your resolve hardened. Your heart began to beat in rhythm with something greater than their judgment, something ancient, something unbreakable. They walked away thinking you were finished. But while they were celebrating your silence, you were sprouting in secret. And when you rose, it was not for their approval. It was not for revenge. It was because growth is inevitable when the spirit refuses to quit. What they used to bury you gave you the very foundation you needed. Because the truth is, growth doesn't happen in the light. It happens in the hidden, in the unseen hours, in the aching moments when no one is watching, and you still choose not to give up. They thought they were taking something from you. But they gave you space, space to shed what was no longer needed, space to release the weight of their expectations, space to become someone who no longer needs the validation they once craved. The very ones who tried to erase your presence unknowingly watered your roots with their doubt. Every time they dismissed you, they deepened your hunger. Every time they mocked you, they sharpened your vision. They were so focused on your absence, they never imagined what you were becoming in the silence. You didn't stay buried. You broke through, and now they stare in confusion. How did you rise without their permission? How did you grow without their applause? But what they forget is, flowers never bloom for the eyes watching. They bloom because it's time, and it was your time. You rose not in rebellion but in alignment, not in rage but in revelation. You were never the fragile one. They just mistook your patience for weakness. And now that you're standing, blooming, rooted, there is nothing left for them to bury, because you've outgrown the soil that tried to suffocate you. So let them wonder, let them whisper. You don't need to explain your rebirth to those who buried you. You are not their version of you anymore. You are the result of every storm they thought would drown you. And yet here you are, tall, grounded, crowned in silence and growing still. You were tempered in fire, not torn in pieces. They saw you stumble, and they thought you were shattering. They mistook your silence as surrender, your stillness as brokenness. But what they failed to see, what they never understood, is that you were not being destroyed. You were being forged. Tempered, refined like steel in fire, and fire doesn't ruin steel, it strengthens it. The process hurts, yes, it burns, it blinds, but it doesn't take away from the metal. It brings out its true strength. That's what your pain did to you. It didn't tear you apart. It brought out the version of you that only pressure, only fire could reveal. Every moment of rejection, every time you were overlooked, doubted, dismissed, those were not moments of defeat. They were the flames, the heat, the shaping force. While the world expected you to collapse, life was preparing you to carry more. You were being stretched, not snapped, bent, not broken, and while it may have felt like everything was falling apart, it was actually falling into place. You didn't see it then, of course. How could you? Fire doesn't feel like growth. It feels like loss, like grief, like silence echoing through places that used to be full of laughter, but underneath that silence something sacred was happening. You were being asked to let go of people, of illusions, of the version of yourself that had learned to settle, to please, to carry what was never yours. And once you began to release it, once you stopped clinging to what was slipping anyway, you began to see the truth. You were not crumbling, you were clearing. The ashes that remained were not proof of failure. They were the sign of transformation, because the most powerful version of you could never be built on comfort. It had to be revealed through resistance, and it was. Now you walk differently, speak with weight, move with quiet certainty, not because you've never been hurt, but because you know exactly what pain has taught you. You don't fear the fire anymore. You've been inside it. You've made peace with its heat. And now, instead of running from the flame, you carry it. That's why you shine the way you do. That's why your presence unsettles those who once tried to diminish you. You remind them of the truth, that what was supposed to end you only began you, that what tried to melt you down ended up hardening your resolve. They called it failure. You call it forging. They called it loss. You call it liberation, because you didn't just survive. You were remade, not into something soft, but into something untouchable, unshakable, fire, born, tempered not in rage, but in silence, refined not in revenge, but in stillness. They thought they had watched you fall apart, but you were never in pieces. You were in progress. They crowned you without knowing. They aimed to wound you. That was the intention. Quietly, cleverly, deliberately, they turned their backs, sharpened their words, and let you bleed without lifting a hand. It wasn't a misunderstanding, it was strategy, and yet, somehow it still didn't finish you. That blade they used, their silence, their betrayal, their absence, was supposed to cut so deep you'd never recover. But you did, and not only did you recover, you rose in a way they never anticipated, not loud, not dramatic, but quietly, like a mountain no one noticed was growing. And when you rose, you weren't the same. You didn't rise to prove a point. You didn't rise for applause. You rose because something in you remembered who you were before they tried to reduce you. You rose because your soul refused to wear chains made from their opinions. And here's the irony. The knife they used to cut you became part of your crown. The pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak. It didn't just fade. It fused into your strength, into your wisdom, into your walk. They didn't break you, they refined you. Every time they dismissed you, every time they lied, every time they hoped you'd stay down, they unknowingly added another jewel to your crown. They gave you the one gift they never intended to, clarity. You see everything now. You see through the masks, the games, the shallow loyalty, and with that clarity came calm. A calm they can't stand, because you no longer react, you no longer chase, you no longer beg for explanations or closure. You don't need their validation. You've become your own foundation. You wear your pain as armor now, not to harden you, but to remind you that no one holds the power to destroy you unless you hand it to them. You took your power back, not with rage, not with revenge, but with evolution, and now you stand taller, walk wiser, smile deeper, not because life became easier, but because you did. You became someone who survived not just the loss of people, but the loss of illusions. You stopped needing to be understood. You started living as if no one owed you anything, and that's royalty. That's what they never saw coming. They crowned you not with gold, but with growth, not with praise, but with pain. And still it shines. Your crown isn't visible to those who look with shallow eyes. But those who know pain, those who have been cut the same way, they see it. They feel it. And they know. Your story wasn't about being hurt. It was about being awakened, and now, you don't need to remind them of who you've become. Your silence says it all. Their knife forged your crown, and now that crown gleams quietly in every room you enter, needing no introduction. Only presence.